Okay, so how's everyone tonight? Doing well? Is this the first week of school for for many of you, either teachers or parents, or somehow this first week of September is usually a big change. And for today's session, we have an agenda as usual. I'd like to just review quickly what we talked about last month and just to refresh what we reviewed and possibly connect it to today. And then we have two questions, and I plan to just respond to those questions briefly, maybe briefly. See how brief I can be. And then we'll have time for discussion after each one. And then, depending on time at the end, we can just have open discussion if other people had other questions or just things you wanted to share. So, for last month, last month, we addressed a couple of questions and we used the concept of the middle way to frame everything. And it was a very theoretical discussion. A big part of it was theoretical, looking at things just from the conceptual angle. And then towards the end, we talked more about how it relates to practice and how it relates to silent illumination practice and also how it relates to compassion. I don't know how you felt about last month's session. To me, it seemed to get a bit too intellectual at one point. Um, some people had feedback and said it was very useful, which is good. But at one point, it was getting intellectual. And interestingly, um, and this can happen, especially when we start to talk about the concept of emptiness, that some people will look at emptiness as a kind of nihilism or, devaluing everything, possibly because the word empty or emptiness has that connotation. But I just wanted to review today that this concept of emptiness, which, as I said last time, with regards to the middle way, this whole perspective of Buddhism, we could call it the middle way. And the teacher Nagarjuna, the Indian master, used this teaching of the middle way and emptiness. He used the word emptiness to present the middle way. And when we understand the word emptiness, in order to understand it correctly, we can't just use it in a way that's, for example, last time we said that everything is empty. Emptiness means everything, including our experience of suffering, and even wisdom is empty. So our human experience of pain and pleasure, as well as freedom, is empty. And then every phenomenon in the universe is empty. If we just stop there and explain it that way, just this is empty, that is empty. And as the Heart Sutra says, there's no suffering, there's no wisdom, there's no attainment, right? The Heart Sutra is basically just, it says there's no anything, or it negates everything. The Heart Sutra negates all the teachings of Buddhism, from the Four Noble Truths all the way up to Nirvana, and saying there's no suffering, there's no wisdom, there's no attainment. And um, if we just look at it that way, it can be easy to think that this teaching of emptiness is somehow denying the existence of everything and saying that nothing has value. And even saying that, well, people who suffer, well, since suffering doesn't exist, then why should we care about other people's suffering? Why should we care when other people suffer? Why should we care even if someone dies? If you remember the last time we talked about the example of someone was going to get hit by a bus, we would try to stop them from suffering. But one person during the session said, well, if there's no suffering and if they get hit by a bus, there's no death anyway, why try to stop it? That kind of thinking comes from getting caught in the idea of emptiness, thinking that it's just devaluing everything, devaluing human life, even devaluing the purpose of Buddhist practice. So it's important to remember that the word emptiness is used in combination with the idea of conditions or causes and conditions. Chinese is yin yuan. So a more holistic way to understand the concept of emptiness is everything exists. It exists because different conditions, different causes and conditions bring about everything, but they're just empty of permanence, or they're empty of self nature. They're empty of a permanent separate self. So suffering exists. We definitely experience suffering, right? We can't deny that. Wisdom exists. There are definitely people who find freedom from suffering and become very skillful and compassionate. Suffering exists, wisdom exists, but they exist dependent on conditions. Well, what are the conditions? Why does suffering happen? Well, Buddhism points out that suffering happens because we are unaware. That's the main condition for suffering. When we're unaware, unaware of our own mind and how it's working, unaware of how our body mind is working, then we suffer. If we're unaware of the nature of our body mind and how it functions, then we suffer. So suffering is conditioned, it comes about because of that. Is it permanent? Of course not. Suffering isn't permanent. So the whole purpose of using emptiness, saying that there's no suffering, is to help us let go of the idea that our suffering is permanent. So this is the practical reason for this whole concept of emptiness, is that if we find ourselves stuck in the idea that, oh, my suffering is just too heavy, this pain I have, this depression I have, this problem I have, it's just, I can't get rid of it. I'm going to be this way forever. This is just the way I was born. This is the way I'm going to be for my whole life. That kind of thinking is when we get stuck in suffering being permanent. When we say there's no suffering, it means that any suffering that we experience is just conditioned, and we all have the potential to change and to work through our problems and to eventually be free from them. So that's the purpose of the idea of emptiness. It's just to help us let go of any attachment to any concept. So if we're stuck in suffering, emptiness reminds us that, well, yes, we experience suffering, but we can get beyond it. When the Heart Sutra says there's no wisdom or wisdom is empty, that's for when we get stuck in the idea that we are wise. If we start to feel pretty good from practicing, we feel much more at ease, and we think to ourselves, I must be enlightened, or, I must be at least wiser than most other people. And we start to think of ourselves as wise. This is when it's useful to say there's no wisdom, because wisdom is not something that we've like earned or attained or gained, and now we're better than other people, which can happen, especially when a person starts to gain a lot of benefit and strength from their meditation, and they feel more confident, they feel more peaceful, less disturbed by things. When they see other people, not confident, when they see other people upset by things, they may think, look at these people. They're always suffering. Why don't they just snap out of it? This is when we can have this kind of arrogance that's called, the Chinese is called 增上慢, which means like a, a kind of super arrogance, an arrogance that comes from this inner peace and stability. So by saying there's no wisdom and there's no attainment reminds us that we haven't gained anything. If we feel peaceful, if we feel confident, if we're getting benefit from the practice, it's just because the conditions for suffering are not there. With awareness, the condition for suffering is gone and we're just freer. So the whole concept of the middle way and emptiness as this tool for helping us to break attachment, this is how to use it and this is how to look at it. Everything exists, everything we experience suffering, we experience wisdom, but we have to be careful not to be attached to either suffering or being wise. Once we're stuck in either concept, then then we're in trouble. Then we suffer more. So that's the middle way. That's using emptiness as the key to the middle way, to be free from all concepts. And if you wanted to review this, you can look into literature on Nagarjuna's teaching. Thich Nhat Hanh has a book on Nagarjuna's, I forget which writing it is. If it's the treatise on the middle way, I think he extracts some sections from that. And the book is called Cracking the Walnut, which is a great book, great explanation of Nagarjuna's expression of the middle way. Okay, so that was last month. The two questions for today. One question has to do with motivation, self-criticism versus self-compassion. The second question has to do with being charitable, how to be charitable wisely. And I'd like to start with the second one, actually. And I'll read the question that someone had posed for tonight's discussion. The question is, what's the right view on generosity? What's the right way to look at or practice generosity? And they said, for example, at the temple, they often announce who has made donations. So let's say, oh, so and so has donated 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. And the person says, I understand everyone has a different financial situation, but I feel a little bit shameful when I see these donations because, other people are donating so much, but I'm not donating that much. So they said, I feel shameful and sometimes criticize myself for being stingy. Should I offer more support? Should I donate more? And they ask, how does Buddhism look at generosity and stinginess? How can we be generous more wisely? I think it was a great question and topic. What do you folks think? Do you ever encounter things like that? In some way, whether it's donating money or donating time, volunteering. I know many of you are involved in volunteering for various causes. I think, for most all of us, we may encounter some situation where we feel like we could be giving more and we feel bad for not giving enough. So I wanted to share a little bit, just for a couple minutes, on my thoughts of charity and wisdom. And afterwards, we can discuss and hear what you guys think. Also, hear from your experiences. So I think it's important first to define things, just to define wisdom and to define charity. Within the Buddhist teachings, there's something called the six paramitas. Chinese is liu du. Have you heard of that? Six paramitas. Um, see if I could remember them. First one is charity. Then there's precepts. Then there's forbearance. Sometimes it's translated as patience, right? Then there's concentration or meditation, wisdom. What else? What am I missing? That's five. Right. Thanks. Diligence. So these six paramitas, they are practices that are based in wisdom. The wisdom paramita, or the emphasis on wisdom, is key within this set of teachings, because they're called paramitas, which literally means to cross over from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom. So these six practices bring about freedom. And wisdom as that key practice that if it's missing, it wouldn't really be liberating practices. So if we just practice charity without the wisdom, it wouldn't really set us free. Or if we just practice precepts without wisdom, it really wouldn't set us free. And so on for all of the other ones. And what are some sutras that we often see the six paramitas in, especially in Mahayana Buddhism? Theravada also they have 10 paramitas, different formula. But what do you often see the six paramitas in Mahayana Sutras? Anyone? Really popular ones within the Zen tradition, especially. No, the second most popular sutra in the Zen tradition. Sutra that Master Huineng spoke about all the time. Yeah, yeah. Diamond Sutras has wonderful examples of how these practices can be done with wisdom or without wisdom. Um, because again, if we, for example, charity without wisdom will probably lead to suffering. Even though somebody's being receiving the gift of charity, it can lead to suffering. Charity with wisdom is sets us free and can even set the other person free. And what do I mean by this? There's some great examples in the Diamond Sutra. I just wanted to share some of those with everyone. Okay, before I get to the examples though, just to redefine wisdom, what is wisdom in the Buddhist context? We use this word all the time. Wisdom is the practice that sets us free from suffering. But how do we really set ourselves free from suffering? Well, it's based on what we just talked about before, seeing things clearly, seeing reality clearly as causes and conditions, and not seeing things through a prism of just concepts. Because whenever we see things through concepts, we get stuck. Soon as there's a concept, we immediately feel that there's permanence, right? As soon as there's a word, like for example, our name, my name, David, and that word, that concept assumes that there's some part of me that's permanent and that's separate from everyone else. And immediately when we cling to that concept, we suffer because then we then value ourself as much more important than everything else. We become the center of the universe, the center of our concern. And everything we do just revolves around this perception of ourself as separate. So wisdom in Buddhism is seeing that everything is conditioned and that we ourselves, what we perceive to be separate, is totally integrated and dependent on everything else. That's the conceptual side of it. How do we experience it? It's actually only experienced when we let go of the concept of self and experience things without this constant noise of thinking, self-centered thinking. So if that's wisdom, then what is charity with wisdom? Well, we could say charity based on wisdom is when we can give, when we can help. We can help others when we can give without even thinking that we've done anything, without even thinking that, oh, look, I've just given to this person. I've just helped this person. Um, I'm a good person because I'm giving. I'm a bodhisattva because I'm giving, or even feeling more important than somebody else. I don't know if you've experienced this, but when we give something, even if it's like giving a piece of information, do we ever feel a little bit better than the other person? Someone asks for help. Hey, do you, even if they're just asking where something is, hey, do you know where this thing is? Oh, yeah, it's over there. Or it's usually something which is a bit more, which requires a bit more effort. Do you know what this means? And we say, oh, yeah, this is what this means. And we may feel a little bit better than that person because we feel I have the knowledge and I gave you the knowledge. With giving financially, maybe that's even easier to feel that sense of superiority. If we're the giver, someone asks for money, we say, "Oh, sure, no problem. I'll lend you some cash." And they're like, "Oh, thank you so much. I was in a really tough situation." We're just like, "No problem." And we may feel superior because either we're financially in a better spot, or we just feel that, I've done something good. So, that was, uh, points, Buddhist points, or, compassion points for giving to someone who is in need. It can be subtle, but I'd say most people have that sense of either being superior when they're the giver, and if we're on the other side, if we're on the receiving end of someone's generosity, do we ever feel that we're somehow inferior? That, oh man, this person, they're always in such a good financial situation. Feel bad for not having more money, more resources, or if it's intellectual, and they're always giving us advice, even emotional support. This person is often listening to us, and we feel like, oh man, they're always giving their time to me, and they're always so patient when I talk to them. We may feel bad for asking. That's like feeling inferior on the receiving end. What the Diamond Sutra points out is that all of that process of vexation, really, whether it's a sense of superiority or inferiority, that's what the Diamond Sutra, the terminology in the Diamond Sutra is, that's dwelling in signs. The Chinese is 住相, dwelling in signs, or it could also be translated as dwelling in symbols. So the symbol or the concept of the giver, the recipient, and the gift. So if we think we're superior, that's dwelling in the sign of the giver as superior. And then on the other hand, if we're feeling inferior, it's dwelling in the sign or the symbol of the recipient. And the Diamond Sutra points out that all of that is self-centeredness. It's attachment to concepts. And in the example of the question that the person brought up, they said, the temple says, oh, so and so donated so much money. And you may have seen in some temples, they have a board. It's usually called, what's it called? The Board of Honorable, the Board of Directors Honorable Mention, something like that. And they'll post people's names up. When I visited China and some of the temples there, there's a brick wall, a huge brick wall, which was eventually led to a staircase, and every brick was a donor's name. So if you were a donor, your name was, uh, carved into the wall of the temple for generations to come. Why is that done? Isn't that just dwelling in signs? The Diamond Sutra says all this talk about not dwelling in signs, not making it out to be a big deal, but in reality, Buddhist temples, Buddhist organizations know that everyone is dwelling in signs. All of us feel good when we're recognized, right? And if we donate, whether it's a lot of money, whether it's a little bit of money, whenever we give, it's nice to receive some recognition, right? It's nice to receive thanks. That's just human nature. We're all attached to signs. So that's why these things are posted. And that's why monasteries would make announcements and say, so and so donated. One way, it's for the monastery, for the monastics, for the institution themselves to practice gratitude because these donations don't come easy, right? This is people's hard-earned money. They're giving it to the temple. So for the temple, yes, it's dwelling in signs, but it's practicing generosity to each person. At the same time, it helps the donor feel good and feel recognized that this gift is appreciated and it's very useful. And we hope they donate again. So all of this has to do with it's actually dwelling in signs. It's attaching to the giver, it's attaching to the recipient, and it's a kind of practice to show gratitude to a specific person, and it's a kind of practice for the donor to um, to receive that gratitude and feel encouraged and to continue to practice giving. But the problem is if this dwelling in signs becomes unskillful, if the donor really thinks that they're very special because they gave a lot of money, some donors can be controlling. And I used to work or serve at DDRC, and I was there when some donors gave a big amount of money and then they would just have big requests. You guys should build this, or you guys should plant that, or you guys should change this, you should do that. And they became a little bit pushy because now they are investment. They invested in us and they want us to do something with it. They want us to do what they want to do with it. That's uh that's when dwelling in signs becomes more vexation. The donor becomes vexed because now they're preoccupied with getting their wishes fulfilled. And the recipient of that donation is also vexed because they have to deal with how are they going to either refuse this person or how are they going to even make their wish come true? Is it a possibility? Can we plant all these trees? Can we build this big building? So it can become a problem and a vexation for the temples. And it can become a vexation for the onlookers, for the people who aren't directly involved. Um, when we see this kind of interaction of a lot of praise towards big donors and maybe sometimes less attention to the people who donate that much, we may start to look and say, hey, are they giving more attention to the big donor? Why? How come I'm not getting attention? How come they're just giving attention to the people who give a lot of money? If we as an onlooker start to get stuck in these signs of who's the giver, who's the recipient, how is all of this being dealt with, then as the onlooker, we can really suffer a lot because of these kinds of comparisons. The practice of the Diamond Sutra just reminds us that yes, we're human. Everyone's human and easily gets attached to feeling of giving, the different feelings that come with receiving gifts, and all the complicated stuff that happens between people. That's human nature. But the Diamond Sutra reminds us that as practitioners, when we give, we can practice giving without being stuck in signs or just stuck in concepts. Who's giving, who's receiving? And the Diamond Sutra goes on to say, what does that mean? How do we give without being stuck in signs? Well, we give, but we just don't have the idea that anyone has given anything and that anyone has received anything. Which, when I first read it, I was very confused. I was like, well, how do you give if you don't have the idea that I have some money and I want to donate it? How could we give? Of course, we still have those ideas, and we also have our bank account numbers. We know how much money we have. Those are all signs. We need to make use of them. But when we just give and let it go. We can forget about it. We just don't dwell on the idea that, oh, this year I gave, 5,000. Last year I only gave 2,000. I wonder if they noticed how much I gave. I wonder if they noticed there was a big donation this year. I wonder if so and so will say something to me, say thanks. If we notice that we have those kinds of thoughts, we practice letting go. We just give. We know it's useful. We know they could benefit from it. We just give. And if we are, as the person who brought up the question, if we feel that we're not giving enough, we can also let go of that idea of not giving enough, because if we use wisdom, we just give what we're able to give. Other people give what other people are able to give. If other people can give 20,000, 30,000, that's them. That's their conditions. Our conditions, if we can only give 1,000, then we give 1,000. If we can only give $50, we just give $50. That's our conditions. We're aware of our conditions, our financial situation, and we're also aware of how much can we give and feel good about it compared to how much do we give and we start to feel more pain the more we give. We think, "Ah, I could give 50, but I think I should give more. Maybe I should give more. I'll give 100." And as we're giving, we're about to push the send button. We're just like, oh, this is gonna hurt. Should we give? If we're causing suffering in the moment that we're giving, is that wise? I remember Shifu saying that you're all welcome to give donations in the donation box, the gong de xiang. He said, but give happily. Don't give painfully. Because if you give painfully, you won't be happy and we'll feel bad also. If we know that you're in pain giving this much, we'll also feel bad. So everyone suffers. But if you give happily, whatever amount that you feel comfortable with, we're happy. And there was a story from the Agamas, I think it was, where there was during that time, people made offerings to the Buddha, all kinds of offerings of food. The wealthy people gave a lot of money. There were kings and various wealthy donors. And there was one woman who was very poor. She didn't have much at all. And she was initially concerned about, how much should she give? She can't give anywheres near what other people were giving. But she eventually just, I think what she donated was some oil, right? Was that it? She donated a little bit of oil, and the Buddha praised her, saying, look at her. She has almost nothing, but she gave something of what she had. That's all that's needed. Just the attitude of giving is a virtuous act. It's an act of letting go of something that we usually hold on to, our possessions, and we let it go. But we let it go to someone or some organization that we know will use it well. And he praised her just for giving what she could joyfully. So I think that that story really illustrates the spirit of generosity and wisdom, which is not getting caught up in uh, how much we're giving, not getting caught up in the fact that we're giving, not getting caught up in any sense of superiority or inferiority, because everything is empty, meaning, um, or because of the recipient, the giver is able to give, right? So whoever we're donating to, thanks to them, we have the opportunity to give. So how could there be superiority or inferiority if both the giver and the giver depend on each other? Thanks to the recipient, the giver can practice generosity. Thanks to the giver, the recipient can practice gratitude. Thanks to the giver, the gift, and the recipient, everyone can practice. Nobody is superior or inferior. Everyone is actually contributing to this relationship, which helps everyone develop wisdom and compassion. Right? So that's true emptiness. All these conditions coming together, only by that we can have wisdom and charity. No one can take the credit. So this is the teaching from the Diamond Sutra on giving and charity. And in the Chan tradition, there's more teaching on giving, cultivating blessings, but also cultivating wisdom. So if you're interested, you can look at the Platform Sutra, which has a more direct way of expressing this, but it's in the same spirit. It's when we truly give with wisdom, everyone is set free. We free ourselves from craving. We feel at ease because we're able to let go of the things we usually crave. The people who are receiving the gift, how are they set free? Well, one, they're supported. They're receiving the gift, but they also practice gratitude and they let go of feeling lacking, practicing gratitude for what they're receiving. They can let go of the vexation of always feeling there's a lack. So this practice of charity and wisdom is integrated. It's quite a wonderful practice when seen in this light. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Yeah, and that can play out in all these different situations. Someone who needs help or may need help and they know they need help, but at the same time they don't want to get help. They don't want to be seen as the person who's being helped, right? Oh no, I don't need your money. Or no, I don't need your help. Meanwhile, we're suffering, but we have this pride, right? We don't want to be seen as needing other people's help. That's also, a kind of self-centeredness, which, yeah, like you said, prevents people from being able to help and keeps us stuck in pride and keeps us often stuck in bad situations where if we let someone help, we would all be set free. We would get the help we would need, we'd let go of our pride, and the other people would be practicing generosity. So, yeah, I think you're right on with that. Refusing help when we know we need it, that can also be stinginess. Um, I think of my own family and then myself sometimes, where I know I may need help to do something, but I'll just try to do it all myself and possibly suffer and possibly burn out when someone else is right there ready to help and say, "Hey, I could help with this." And we're like, "No, I'll do it." And that can lead to self-damage, right? Yeah, great insight. In the Buddhist tradition, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, giving is really emphasized, but some people can get stuck in it and even end up volunteering too much. I don't know how many conversations I've had recently with people who are volunteering that because of volunteering, they burnt out because they felt an obligation, like, oh, I have to give, so and so fa shi asked me to do this, so I just have to say yes, I think. And they end up taking on so many projects that they exhaust themselves giving. Um, and that can be a problem. So in that situation, it's getting caught up in the idea that we have to give all the time. That's also causes suffering. It's not wise compared to being able to say no. That's also practicing wise charity, saying no when we don't have the resources or energy to give. Just like, giving too much money painfully, giving too much of our time and energy painfully. That's not wise, and it eventually creates suffering for everyone. I witnessed some volunteers burn out, just they would come into the center, they'd volunteer, but they would be very angry. It's like, what's going on? It's like Fasha had me do this, and then this Fasha asked me to do this, and then so and so asked me to do this, and it's too much. The exhaustion and the fact that they didn't yet know how to say no, they really, you know, became very angry while doing the volunteering. So that hurts everyone. So saying no is part of charity. Yeah. No, maybe there's some charity of involved with communication there. What is mom really, what's going on with mom? If you know yourself, it seems you're clear about that, but I wonder if there's a better way to communicate with mom about your practice of charity. Maybe she doesn't understand. Maybe she does miss you a little bit. Who knows?
Thank you.
That's my guess. Could be more communication. Then we know what's going on with the other person. Yeah, so here the emphasis is on knowing ourselves. How much giving can we give with joy? How much giving is going beyond our limit and then suffering because of that? We're looking forward to the second question. Should we move on? Okay, so this question has to do with um, motivation and motivation either coming from self-criticism or self-compassion. So I'll just read the person's question first so you can get a clear idea of the context. So they said, in Buddhism, I often hear about self-compassion, but I'm very used to self-criticism because I feel that if I don't criticize myself, then I won't become the person that I want to be. So I hope to learn how to practice self-compassion while still achieving my goals. And they said, but sometimes when I work hard, I start to feel burnt out, and then I just want to give up or just be lazy. And that's when my self-criticism kicks in to push me a little further. So they ask, well, how can I use self-compassion in these moments instead of using self-criticism to um, to move forward or to encourage myself? And they go on to say, so just to clarify, I'm not talking about pushing myself when I'm in a bad state, but it's more about how to build a new habit when I feel a lot of resistance. For example, when I started meditating, I often found excuses not to do it every day, even when I wanted to establish the habit. And they said, but now it is a habit, so I don't mind doing it. I actually enjoy it. But the process of building the habit was not fun. And I want to understand this better because there are many situations that require me to learn new habits. And in order to have a better life and reach my goals, I want to find a different way. Really practical, right? Have you encountered something like that? You want to make a change, you want to build a habit, you want to develop something or reach a goal, and it can really be hard to be consistent. And self-criticism may kick in, depending on how you were raised or where you went to school. You may have received encouragement in different ways. Some places encourage people with things like, "Oh, keep going, you're going to do this. You can do this. Keep at it." More so-called positive encouragement. And then there's more negative encouragement, like you should be better at this. Don't be weak. You know, keep going, push yourself. Don't be such a baby or whatever. Using negativity to urge you on. So could have been your parents or teachers or siblings that used either approach, and we internalize that. The things that we hear other people say to encourage us, we internalize that. And we may even pick it up from reading or just from absorbing media. At some point, we develop a way to encourage ourselves. And for a lot of the time, people find self-criticism as a powerful mechanism that, on the good side, it seems to help us get things done. On the bad side, it can lead to a lot of, you know, pain and an inner conflict, even self-hatred, if the self-criticism is chronic enough, where we work very hard, we try our best, but we may end up hating ourselves because the self-criticism has become such a powerful mechanism. So how do we use compassion, self-compassion to motivate? This is great. So again, I'll share a little bit and then I'd like to hear what you folks have to share. So it's important again to define things. What is compassion in the Buddhist context? And maybe you folks can define it. What's your understanding of the definition of compassion? Chinese is 慈悲. Hmm. Okay. So compassion is understanding and accepting difference. Okay, great. Other folks? So understanding and reducing suffering. Yeah, I agree with both of those definitions. Seeing us all as integrated, inseparable. And could we say that because of that, we all mutually affect each other? With that perspective, con compassion includes wisdom, right? And that's a key aspect of compassion in Buddhism is that it includes wisdom. So while helping to remove suffering, we see this integration, this inseparable nature, the empty nature of all of us. We're all integrated. We're all conditioning each other. That's compassion and wisdom being equal or integrated. So in the Buddhist definition of compassion, it includes wisdom. If it doesn't, if we don't have this clear seeing of our interrelatedness, then it's not really compassion. It's just maybe kindness, being nice. I'm being nice to you. I'm helping you. I'm understanding you. That's still a dualistic kind of compassion. Compassion and wisdom, there's no need for that duality. It's just helping is done because it needs to be done. Just like giving. Giving is done because it needs to be done. Compassion is resolving suffering is done because it just needs to be done. So, um, with that in mind, how do we motivate ourselves using compassion? Well, there has to be wisdom there. So if we know ourselves and we know our situation, we know not only what we want, some of our goals are just based on what we want, right? I want this outcome. Some of our goals are based on what we need. We need to have this outcome, or we need to engage in something in order to survive and thrive. Wisdom is also just knowing what we don't need, what's harmful. If we know what's harmful, then we can also motivate ourselves wisely. And another aspect of this is in Buddhism, we don't use this terminology much, but with wisdom, we know our values. We know what's important to us. Buddhism has its own value set, right? Buddhism values what? Buddhism values wisdom and compassion, right? Buddhism values these overall principles of how to be a person, how to be a free person, uh, truly compassionate and wise person. That's the value of Buddhist values. But we all have our own individual values, which Buddhism doesn't say anything about. So, what career should we have? What school should we go to? What person should we be in a relationship with? Buddhism doesn't tell us what to do, right? Doesn't say, as Buddhists, you should only do these jobs. It doesn't say that. It only says, try to do jobs where you're not killing people or harming things, right? That's part of right livelihood of Buddhism. Try to do things where you're not harming. As long as you're not harming, doing your best not to harm, then that's a good career. But then which career do we choose? Which partner do we choose to spend our life with? These are individual values. With wisdom, we can also be much more clear about our individual values. What's important to us? What are we good at? What are our strengths and weaknesses? If we're clear about that, we'll have a much uh, more concrete direction for uh, what goals do we want to achieve? What goals are realistic to achieve? And what could we really put our effort into? We need to know what we value. So, to make this more concrete, someone brought up, the person who wrote the question brought up the difficulty with starting a meditation routine. So you could think of your own situation where you have this thing you want to work on. Do you really want to do it? In this context, is meditation really important? How important is it? If we just say, yeah, I'm gonna meditate every day because I think it's good. I mean, I hear it's good for me. David's always saying you should meditate every day. All these Buddhist places, they say you should just meditate every day. And some places say that you have to meditate for 2 hours. Do you want to meditate for 2 hours every day? An hour in the morning, an hour in the evening? Some people are like, yeah, that's what I do. But we may be like, well, I think I want to meditate every day, but how long? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think it's good. Sometimes we're not really clear of why we even want to do the thing that we set out to do. Or we may not be clear of the degree of its importance. So if it's very important to you, meditation is essential. You know it's as important as eating and sleeping. You'd have no difficulty in sitting for 2 hours a day. or at least you'd find time to do it twice a day. If if we don't think it's that important, it can be really difficult to even sit for 5 minutes. We may think, yeah, meditation is important, but I'll just sit whenever I have time. That'll be good enough. And maybe for some people, that is good enough. They sit when they feel like it, and that's fine. But if we want to establish a habit, habits need to be done frequently, repeatedly, and consistently. In order for us to really apply ourselves, we have to think it's important. And it may take some time to first understand ourselves. How much do I value meditation? Then I'll know how much do I want to do it. If we look at meditation as important as eating and sleeping, and actually that meditation can improve the quality of not only eating and sleeping, but every aspect of our life, then we'll know it's important to do it consistently. But then we can also ask, well, again, how long should I sit for? If we're just starting out on the path of meditation, should we just start with 2 hours a day? That would probably be detrimental and turn someone off to the practice unless they can just sit there very comfortably and time goes by and an hour goes by in no time. If that's the case, there's no problem. But for most people, we need to start small. So starting with 5 minutes a day is skillful when we're just beginning and we haven't yet gotten accustomed to meditation or whatever the goal is, whatever the task is. Starting small allows us to approach it in a way that doesn't create suffering or create obstacles. So, if we're clear about our values and we're also clear about our conditions, our needs, we know how to approach this action plan. So, we really value meditation. We know we definitely have to do it every day, but if we could start with 5 minutes. The more we get used to it, the more we get accustomed to it, we add time. Eventually, we may find that 2 hours is no problem. And it's really improving the quality of our overall condition in life. But the person who wrote the question also said the process is sometimes really not enjoyable. And why is that? Even meditation, they said later on I enjoyed it, but starting was really tough. And it may have been because um, they started with too much. They started in a way that didn't suit their condition. It was either too much, maybe the method was not the right method, um, frequency was not the right frequency, or their attitude was problematic. Maybe they were expecting results very quickly. So every time they sat down, they were waiting for something to happen. What's going on? I don't feel anything. What time is it? I still don't feel anything. Checking the clock, checking how they feel. I was speaking with someone recently and she said, yeah, every time I sit, I do the steps, relax, step by step, relax, follow my breath, and then I check to see if I'm doing it right. And say, well, how do you do that? How do you check? Well, she says, I kind of, see how I feel and think to see if it's going as well as it should be going. It's like, how do you do that? She's basically evaluating and comparing how she felt in the moment to what her expectation of what meditation should bring. A level of peace, this feeling, that feeling. So that was actually an obstacle for her to really settle into the practice because she was constantly evaluating herself. Am I doing this right? Is this working? So the process can be difficult if we're not using the right approach for our needs or our condition. Or we could be adding these elements of self-criticism, self-evaluation along the way, which make it painful. "Oh, I'm not good enough yet. I'm not sitting well enough yet. I should be calmer by now. It's been 2 weeks. I should feel calmer. I should feel more awakened." Or even if we've been doing it for 30 years, I should be enlightened by now. What's going on? I'm way behind these other folks. Um, and if we have these faulty approaches, whatever we do, it won't be sustainable. If it's really painful, if the process is miserable, it's not going to be sustainable, right? We're not going to want to continue. So, in the spirit of compassion, compassion means to relieve suffering and to bring joy. So, our practice, our process of engaging in our goals, in our action plan, the process should be joyful. It shouldn't be miserable. If it's miserable, there's something that we're doing that's off. Could it be uncomfortable? Sure, it could be uncomfortable. Like we could experience feelings that are not pleasant. That's fine. That's normal. Just like with sitting meditation, our legs may hurt for quite a while until we get used to it. It's just an uncomfortable sensation. But if we're miserable, we're like, "Oh my God, my legs are killing me." And the whole time, after 5 minutes, like from minute 5 to minute 20, we're just complaining to ourselves in our mind, like, "Oh my God, when is this gonna end? This is terrible." Basically, from minute 5 to 20 is a waste of time. Minute 1 to 5 was useful. All past that is just creating suffering. It's not even dealing with the pain skillfully, it's just causing suffering. So we might as well just sit for 5 minutes until we can get accustomed to it, until we can be more at ease with discomfort. And then the process is joyful, and we'll want to sit, we'll want to do it, and it will be sustainable. Um, so this is just some thoughts to share about using compassion to motivate ourselves. It needs to include wisdom. It needs to include an awareness of our value of the goal, our value of the act, as well as to be able to bring ourselves joy in the process. That will be sustainable. And that will be something that we can enjoy all along the process. Even if we don't reach the goal, we'll still have enjoyed the whole practice itself. So, in my experience, this applies to everything, not just sitting meditation, but all life goals. If we're clear about our value, we know our conditions, and we find an action plan that suits our conditions, then we can do whatever, work on whatever we want to with joy and with patience. And even if we don't reach the goal, we're still content because we've cultivated joy. You know? Just to share for myself, I also try to sit twice a day, 40 minutes to an hour. Some days when I feel great, I sit for the whole hour. But some nights I'm so tired, even when I start. But I'll sit, and if I sit and I start to doze off or I just feel this heaviness, I'll finish early. I'll just go to sleep. If I'm already about to pass out, I know it's time to go to sleep. There's no need to try to push through that to sit for the whole hour. That doesn't make sense. I need to sleep. That fatigue is needs to be recovered. So, that's an example of setting a goal, action plan, but adapting to what we need based on the situation. Some days longer, some days shorter. Yeah, a lot of great reflections on how this can be culturally, um, we can be influenced by our cultures, the bigger and small cultures, society, family culture, It can be hard to see what's the difference between just hardship, enduring hardship. So not only diligence, but it's all the paramitas, diligence, endurance, like enduring hardship. How do we know if it's a healthy kind of hardship or just downright creating suffering? Feels like this should be the next topic. I think it's a great question for next time. Be okay if we continue with that? So the question, how do we know if if we're being diligent? It's the general question, right? How do we know what is diligence? When is it healthy? When is it unhealthy? When is it creating suffering or when is it actually beneficial? And see everybody in a month. Thanks, everyone.